We now interrupt our regularly scheduled program for this important update.
Hello everyone, I am back. And it is a hot day here in Texas. It's 107 degrees actual temperature. And with the heat index, it feels like 111. Believe me, I wouldn't doubt it. I am sweating as it is, and I just got out here. All right, those of you that have been following know that I have multiple projects that I am planning on doing. And with lead times right now, anywhere from 3 months to 6 months to a year or more, when you run across parts that you need for one of your projects, you better grab it while it's available. So a GT40 is on my list of cars I want to build, and a body just happened to become available, I don't know, about a month or two ago. And this one happened to be from a actual GT40. There were molds made from the GT40, and this body was made from the molds. It's a Mark 1, which is my favorite of the GT40 body designs. So I bought it. Plan was to just set it aside until the other pieces became available. Well, wouldn't you know it, but not long after that, a chassis became available. And again, rather than waiting the typical 1 year to 2 years for a chassis to be built, I went ahead and bought that. I still left a couple of pieces. One is an engine, two is a transaxle. So I was discussing engine options with various groups I'm in and my own Facebook page, and I'd come to the conclusion that I was going to put in either a big block FE 427 engine or a small block 427, which would be a 351 that's been bored and stroked to be a 427. I was really leaning towards the big block because of the appeal of a big block. But then somebody reached out to me and said, hey, I have a small block 427 that I had for a project. In fact, he was going to put it in a GT40 and he bailed and decided to do something else. And so he had the engine. So I went ahead and reached out to him and we made a deal. It was a 15-hour, actually probably 15-and-a-half-hour round trip to go get it. I ran to go get it because he had someone else that said they were going to come look at it. Of course, you know, with internet people, you never know whether they're ever going to show up or not, but I didn't want to take a chance. So I jumped in my truck and drove down to get it. And here it is. So a couple things. One, it has a Dart cast iron block, aftermarket block. You can tell that is an aftermarket block because of the part that protrudes right here past the heads. That's for the bigger, to accommodate a bigger bore. It can be bored out even bigger. It has AFR heads that have been CNC ported. It has a Howard's roller camshaft. It has a, I think it's a Super Victor, if I'm not mistaken, intake manifold. It did have a 750 carburetor on it. It's gone. He sold it previously. It has a oil pan. This was in a Mustang, what I call late model Mustang, but it was before the Coyote engines. And I forget, it's a K-Tech or something like that. I can't read it here because of the sun. Anyway, it's aluminum oil pan. It does have the provision for the cross member for the steering. Don't know if that's going to cause an issue. I won't know until I get it into the chassis. I may have to put a flat pan because a flat pan could hold the same quantity of oil without being so deep. Definitely don't want the pan sticking below the chassis. I needed a way to hold the engine in place, and that means you could either just go buy a $125 engine cradle for moving around, or what a lot of us do is grab an old tire. Unfortunately, I threw away all my old tires, but luckily I stopped by a discount tire, told the guy I was going to pick up a race engine. I just needed an old tire to stick it in. He said, come on in the back. Went in the back, found a tire. He said, I'm supposed to charge you for this, but don't worry about it. So very nice of him. Thank you very much. So we got the engine hoist, dropped the engine in, and took off. What else? That's all I have here. It does have all the accessories. I will probably upgrade those to polished aluminum because I like that. Personal preference. Doesn't look bad, black, but this is going to be a high-end car, so I want everything to look nice. Oh, and the intake will be replaced with a Borla stack fuel-injected EFI. All right, and the engine came with documentation. So if you look, the engine was built in
January 17th, 2020. At least that's this receipt. And back then, the total was $14,049.40. Obviously, now that price is significantly higher. Would be if you were to have the same thing built. Here's the sheet from the engine. It is a 427, 9.8 to 1 compression. Carburetor that they tuned it with was a 750. They have the Super Victor, and timing was at 34 degrees. It put out 550 horsepower at 5,400 RPM, and it put out 547 foot-pounds of torque at 4,400 RPM. All right, so now everybody measures wheel horsepower. This is not wheel horsepower. This is crankshaft horsepower, so of course it's going to be lower due to drivetrain losses. Don't know, don't care. Here is the dyno sheet, and it shows the 550 horsepower and the 548 foot-pounds of torque. There it is in graph form. There is the bob weight for balancing the engine. The engine was balanced, obviously. Here is the block that's in there, the Dart SHP Special High Performance Cast Iron Bare Block. Here is the sheet for the specs on the Howard cams, hydraulic roller camshaft. That's something I definitely wanted, was a roller cam. RPM range 2,800 to 6,800, so a little higher than I would want, but that's okay. Lopi idle, hot street and bracket racing 10 to 1 plus compression ratio advised 9.8, pretty close. By the way, it's impressive that it put out 550 horsepower and 548 foot-pounds of torque with only a 9.8 to 1 compression. If I was to bump that up, it would be significantly higher, but I want this to be able to run on pump gas, and I would like for it to idle somewhat reasonably. Here is the spring specs for each of the springs, open and closing. And then there are some other receipts, but I looked at these, and these are almost all parts that were specific for putting this in that Mustang. I don't know what generation those Mustangs are called. It's irrelevant because that's not what I'm using it for. And then some other miscellaneous stuff. So that's what I have. Okay, so now I have the body, I have the chassis, I have now an engine. I'm still going to need stuff like headers and all of that, which may be a challenge. I don't know what headers fit on this. I will find out. But the big thing that is still missing is a transaxle, and finding a transaxle that will handle not only 550 horsepower, but it's mostly that 548 foot-pounds of torque that I'm worried about. So if anybody has suggestions, that's going to be a challenge, being able to do that. But that's the next thing. So again, my idea was this was going to be a one of these days projects, and things just kept falling in my lap. And with things the way they are, and things being hard to get, and the lead times, I just couldn't afford to pass up this stuff. So the next thing to do is put out the feelers for the transaxle. All right, that's where I'm at now. So go ahead, like, subscribe, hit the alert, hit the thanks if you want to donate. And if you don't like what I'm doing, you don't know jack. Bye.